we have some good news regarding Jack Hughes and his injury. However, will he still be able to return within a reasonable amount of time to make sure that the Devils don't sink? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Chalky Play announcer, Devils Wire Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Okay. In the New Jersey Devils' latest game, they got shut out by the Vegas Golden Knights, but that was not the main storyline. The main storyline was the injury circumstance surrounding their star player, Jack Hughes, because he took a scary fall toward the end of the game that saw him hunched over and grabbing his right arm. And remember, he's had trouble with his right shoulder in the past. That's what impacted his season last year dearly. So everybody was holding their breath because Jack sustaining another injury to his shoulder, especially with how inconsistent the Devils have been the last month or so, or not even month, 2 months, because they've been slumping since the end of December. But digressing a little bit, if Jack Hughes is out for an extended period of time, that hurts the Devils. That pretty much ends their season right then and there. However, we do have a positive update. So in the first segment, we're going to talk about that positive update. And I'm going to go back to what I said in the prior episode, which is if Jack Hughes was theoretically sidelined for many weeks, the rest of the season, something like that, would the Devils' season virtually be over? And what should they do? Then in the second segment, we're going to talk about how the Devils approach the trade deadline. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a minute, haven't you already discussed that? Well, yes, but a lot of people are talking on social media saying that the Devils should become sellers at the trade deadline since Jack Hughes supposedly is going to be out for an extended period of time. And I want to talk more about that because I think people have the wrong idea. Then in the third and final segment, if I said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. The Devils don't really have that many assets to trade. And I've talked about it in a prior episode before. The Devils should not sacrifice their future for a rental player. However, if the opportunity presented itself for them to get someone like Jared McCann or a player of that caliber, would I be willing to part ways with a prospect? We're going to talk about that to close out today's episode, but let's talk about Jack Hughes' injury to kick off today's episode. So, courtesy of Gabriel Trevino of NJ.com, he put this out on social media yesterday afternoon, and he said, Jack Hughes flew back to New Jersey to be evaluated by team doctors per source. I'm told it may not be as severe as some are expecting. Okay, let me start off with this. That is good news because worst case scenario is that Jack Hughes is going to be sidelined the rest of the season because don't look now, but it is early March and we only have like a month and a half remaining in the season. So if Jack Hughes is scheduled to miss 2 months, then virtually he's out for the rest of the season, and the Devils will be in a very, very bad situation. But if it's not as bad as we're anticipating, okay, that eliminates him being out for the rest of the year. But I'm going to add on to that and say we still don't know the severity of the injury. So how many games is he going to miss? How many weeks is he going to miss? Is he going to miss just a couple weeks? Is it going to be shorter than that, longer than that? We still don't know. So let me make this perfectly clear. I'm glad that it's not worst case scenario. I'm glad that it's not sort of a repeat as to what happened last year. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet because Daniel Moya of the Hockey Writers put this out and he said, according to a report, Devils Luke Hughes was quote unquote emotional in the locker room following his brother Jack's injury. Based on everything we know, it seems to be pretty serious. I think there's still a lot of unknown surrounding Jack's injury, and I don't think we're going to know the full severity of it until the Devils put out a statement saying, here's what Jack's dealing with. He's going to be out for this amount of time. He'll be ready to go at around this date. So I'm waiting for that official statement from the Devils. Then we can really gauge the matter. But for right now, I'm glad that it's not worst case scenario, but we are not out of the woods yet. Now, in the previous episode, I said that if Jack was hypothetically out the rest of the year, then the Devils are pretty much done. I'm sure some of you are wondering, was I being over dramatic? Was that a little too over the top? No, I still stand by it. If Jack is done the rest of the season, hypothetically, not saying he is, then the Devils are royally screwed because here's what they're going to have to deal with. Let's just look at a few games on the docket. Their next game is tonight when this episode goes live, the Dallas Stars. And the Stars are one of the top teams in the Central Division. Then on March 7th, they got to play the Winnipeg Jets, the best team in the NHL record-wise. March 9th, the Flyers. Now, I know the Flyers are one of the bottom-tier teams in the Metropolitan Division, but they've already given the Devils trouble this year. Then you got the Columbus Blue Jackets on March 11th, and they're one of the more fascinating teams in the NHL right now because they're in a wild card spot. Then you got the Edmonton Oilers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, bottom-tier Metro team, but you don't want to underestimate your competition. Then the Columbus Blue Jackets on March 17th. You get the gist of it, which is the Devils still have a lot of big games on hand, and they're already struggling. That's my main thing. And when we're looking at the standings, what was once a comfortable cushion has now got smaller, smaller, and smaller for New Jersey. The Devils are still one of the top 3 teams in the Metropolitan Division. They're currently below the Hurricanes, who have 74 points. Devils have 72. Right below the Devils are the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets have 68 points, and they're on a 4-game winning streak. And don't look now, but the New York Rangers, they have 66 points, and they're on a 2-game winning streak. Wouldn't it be funny if the Rangers got into the playoffs and the Devils missed it? The Rangers discourse is not going to let the Devils hear the end of that. I'm just saying. Fair warning. So for my sake and the entire fan base's sake, I really hope the Devils still find their way into the playoffs over the Rangers. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with a lot of taunting the next few months. But digressing a little bit, the point I'm just trying to make is that the Devils are not in a comfortable position, and they have been an inconsistent team since Christmas break. And it doesn't seem like they're snapping it anytime soon. And the big thing is, if Jack Hughes is out for an extended period of time, that puts a huge damper on your offense. Now, let me make this point. The Devils have a lot of good players on their roster, including Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Markstrom, you name it. They have a lot of good contributors on their roster that I'm sure a lot of teams will love to have on their roster. But the problem is that the Devils couldn't figure it out with Jack Hughes. Now, you take him out the equation, they didn't get any better. They still have good players, but you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. You're missing one of the huge components to your engine, and that's Jack Hughes. The Devils have been shut out 7 times this season. That is tied for second most in the NHL. Right above them are the Nashville Predators, who have been shut out 9 times this year, for reference. offense has sometimes been tough to come by for the Devils, and we know how putrid their bottom six has been in terms of contributing goals. So Jack Hughes not being in the mix, I know the Devils still have a lot of good players, but make no mistake, losing Jack is a humongous blow. I get it. Everyone wants to be optimistic, but we got to be realistic as well. If Jack couldn't figure out some of the offensive struggles, then without him on the ice, the Devils aren't a better team. I don't know what else to tell you. So, yes, I stand by what I said in my latest episode, which is if Jack Hughes is out for an extended period of time to the point where it's pretty much he won't return until toward the end of the year, the Devils are screwed big time. And take it from me, I'm one of the more optimistic Devils content creators, but even I have to acknowledge where there's a hiccup along the way. And right now, I'm just hoping for the best for Jack Hughes. I really am. Okay, we're going to talk about the Devils' approach come the trade deadline, which is actually in a few days away. It is on Friday. Before we continue, let me tell you guys about Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller all day long. As you guys know, I'm constantly on the go, constantly traveling, so I love having a snack by my side. Personally, I love the no shells variety. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Okay, courtesy of Christy Flannery of the Hockey News, she recently shared a quote from Elliot Friedman. He recently went on 32 Thoughts podcast and said, Tom Fitzgerald has been one of the more active general managers, which is Fitzy's making calls, but so far, no good. The Devils still have not made a move, and the trade deadline is inching closer, and it's getting to a point where people are sitting on pins and needles. And I put out a few suggestions. Ryan Donato of the Chicago Blackhawks, a possible reunion with Kyle Palmieri, Jake Evans from the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, there's pros and cons to trades, but the Devils kind of have their hands tied behind their back. And a lot of people on social media, aside from expressing their frustrations and impatience, they've also been saying if Jack Hughes was out for an extended period of time, does this impact the Devils' goals come the trade deadline? What are the Devils' goals? Well, their main priority is to get more scoring options, particularly with their bottom six, because with all due respect to players like Eric Haula, Paul Cotter, Tomas Tatar, Nathan Bastian, others, they're not really going to contribute that consistently as proven this year. So the Devils are in desperate need of just trying to get more scoring options outside of their core four in Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, and Timo Meier. And I know Jack Hughes, hypothetically being added to the IR, that would be a big blow for New Jersey, but no, it does not change their mindset come the trade deadline. They should still be buyers, not sellers. Well, they theoretically can't be sellers because they have too many long-term deals on the table. They're not going to trade away Andre Palat. They're not going to trade away Dougie Hamilton. Now's not the time to blow it up, people. It just doesn't make sense. It's why I'm a little confused with Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators. I'm like, yes, your team's not doing well, but you can't become sellers come to trade deadline. You have too many long-term deals on the table. But anyway, focusing on the Devils, their mindset should remain the same, but the sentiment does not change, which is the Devils don't have many tradable assets. It's like that episode from The Simpsons, Don't Make Me Tap the Sign Again. And what's the sign in this case? Well, it's my list of players who have no movement clauses, no trade clause, and modified no trade clause. Let me go over it one more time. Players with a no movement clause: Timo Meyer, Jesper Bratt, Andre Palat, Dougie Hamilton, and Jacob Markstrom. Players with a no trade clause: Eric Haula, Brett Pesce, and Brendan Dillon. Modified no trade clause: Nico Hischier, Jonas Siegenthaler, Stefan Nason, and Jake Allen. So the Devils still are in a bit of a pickle when it comes to trying to negotiate a trade, and you don't want to sacrifice your youth for a 1-year rental. You got to be smart about this. And going back to what the Devils should do come the trade deadline, one of my colleagues over at Pucks and Pitchforks, Alex Chavancy, he actually wrote an article about the matter for his own personal site, Devils on the Rush. I will leave a link to that article in the description if you want to hear Alex's thoughts on the matter. But he wrote down 3 reasons why the Devils should continue to become buyers once the trade deadline approaches. And I'm going to repeat some of those reasonings because I actually do agree with them. The first being is the ultimate goal for the Devils. What is that ultimate goal, you might be asking? Well, before the start of the season, I said my main goal for the Devils is to get back to the playoffs. It's playoffs or bust with this Devils unit. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs this year, that's an improvement. Everything else is gravy. So if they make it past the first round, that's just gravy. If they make it past the second round, once again, that's just gravy on top. I want the Devils to get back to the playoffs, and they're still in a playoff position, albeit they're not in a comfortable spot because they don't have many points to work with, and they're not very consistent, but they're still in a playoff position. The second reasoning is you can't waste another year with this core. Nico Hischier, Timo Meyer, Jesper Bratt, possibly Jack Hughes if all goes well and he comes back in a few weeks. I don't really know. But the core for the Devils is signed long term. And every year you waste, that window to possibly win a championship, it grows smaller. And the Devils cannot be this inconsistent team that makes the playoffs, misses the playoffs, makes the playoffs, misses the playoffs. They should be a consistent playoff team when healthy. And I spoke about this with Mike Moriel over the summer. I know we always rave about how young the core is. And yes, they are young in terms of age. All of them are in their 20s. But you got players like Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt who are veteran players. You can't really consider them young bucks in the league. Why is that? Because they are close to 10 years of experience in the NHL. Yeah, they're not young pups anymore in the words of Stefan Nason. So you cannot continue to waste time with this core, even if you have to limp across the finish line to get into the playoffs. You can't just be doing this where you miss the playoffs, you make the playoffs, you miss the playoffs. And the third reason, Jacob Markstrom is signed for this season and next season, and you gave up a first-round draft pick to get his services. Now, I'm not saying anything is wrong with Jacob Markstrom because prior to his injury, he was in the race for the Vezina Trophy, albeit he was not going to win it. Connor Hellebuck is going to run away with that title, but he was still in the mix. Jacob Markstrom has been phenomenal, and you just can't waste your time with Jacob Markstrom because he's getting older. There's no guarantee that he's going to re-sign an extension. There's no guarantee that he might even return to the Devils. It's one of the reasons, no. It's the main reason why the Devils don't have a first-round draft pick this year. And it's another reason why they have their hands tied behind their back when it comes to trade discussions because they use their first-round draft pick to get Jacob Markstrom during the offseason. So you cannot waste any time here. Yes, I get it. It's frustrating that the Devils continue to run into bad luck and also inconsistent play, but don't waste the time that you have. even if you have to limp across the finish line, you better squeeze out every ounce of this opportunity you have. Because, like I said, the window is going to get smaller, 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 and smaller for every year you waste. And if I have to look at this in a positive manner, let's just say, worst case scenario, Jack Hughes is done the rest of the year, similar to Matthew Tkachuk and the Florida Panthers. You can put Jack Hughes on the LTIR, and that opens up some money for the Devils to pursue someone like Jared McCann. Now, as you guys know, I briefly mentioned Jared McCann in one of my silly season discussion episodes from last week, but I said, like, just given the financial circumstance for his contract, I didn't really see it happening. But if Jack Hughes is put onto the LTIR alongside Jonas Siegenthaler, that opens up some money, and the Devils can do what Vegas likes to do, which is put guys on the LTIR and continue to just finesse the system, if you would. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, the Devils should be buyers come the trade deadline. Now, this question was put out by my boss, Nick Villano, over at Pucks and Pitchforks, and he published this on social media. If you had to choose one or the other, who are you willing to give up? Shimon Nemeth or Anton Salayev? Now, I'm not going to answer that question because I like both of them for different reasons. I think if you give Shimon Nemeth a bigger chance, then maybe he'll thrive a little bit more. I think he has a lot of untapped potential. I know it's been a bit of a struggle trying to fit him into the Devils once again, but make no mistake, he was an all-star in the AHL, and he was performing really well with Utica. And for Anton Salayev, in the words of Mike Yegorov, Salayev is a beast, and he was ranked the best skater out of Europe during the draft. So, in the words of Jersey Joe, Salayev might be a unicorn. You can't sacrifice that. You might regret it. And he could become the next Victor Hedman. We're just going to have to wait and see. One of his idols was Victor Hedman, and he was compared to Victor Hedman during the draft. But I'm going to make this question from Nick Villano a little more broad, which is, would I be willing to sacrifice a prospect if it meant the Devils can get a big name player come the trade deadline? This is a difficult question to answer because, like I've been saying throughout the course of the week, don't sacrifice your youth for a one-year rental. However, if you're able to get someone like Jared McCann, who's able to make an impact right away, and you would have him for a few seasons, then maybe I'd be willing to sacrifice the right prospect. I don't think I'm willing to move on from Nemeth, Casey, or Salayev. I still think that the most valuable asset that the Devils possess are their 3 second-round picks in this year's draft. I think you can use those picks and maybe a low-end prospect in a deal to get a good contributor, but certainly don't throw in a prospect for a player like Donato or Palmieri or Evans, players that just might be a few month rental because you just sacrificed parts of your future for a rental. So to answer the question, I am willing to move on from a prospect, but it has to be for a player who is signed for a few more seasons and can make an impact right away. That's the only exception I will make, because I think the Devils will put themselves behind the 8 ball if they sacrifice their future for a rental, because I don't think the Devils are going to hoist the Stanley Cup at the end of this year. I really don't. I think they're a playoff team, but I don't think they're a contending team. They haven't shown me that they can become contenders. So getting someone like Donato, that's a huge ad. Don't get me wrong, but Donato's not going to be your saving grace. He's not going to be the one that instantly makes you a Stanley Cup contender. He makes you more dangerous, yes, but playoffs are a different beast, as we all know. So that's where I stand with the whole trade deadline approach, and I'm sure I'm going to talk more about that as the trade deadline looms. But let me know your thoughts. What are your opinions on the Jack Hughes circumstance? Do you think he's going to return within a reasonable amount of time? And what do you think the Devils should do come the trade deadline? And who are you willing to sacrifice? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TrainMat4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Thanks for listening. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.